we're going to move on forward with our first poll question for you all to participate in. So here it comes. It's about to come on, and we'd love for you to make a selection. The poll question is, what do you think is the best way to be an ally to Black female entrepreneurs? Is it know the difference between real and performative allyship and practice the former? Take a step beyond mentorship and be a sponsor? Be an active bystander against microaggressions, or use your votes and dollars to push for bigger policy and ecosystem changes? So we'll go ahead and let those results roll in. Take a few seconds to submit your response. And let's see what we've got so far with the results. All right. All right, let's see. It looks like we've got the 54% saying take a step beyond mentorship and be a sponsor. We'll let those results keep rolling in, and we'll revisit them again in just a little bit. All right. A USA Today analysis in 2020 shows of the top 279 executives listed in S&P, 274 are white, Hispanic, Asian, and other ethnicities. Only 5 represent Black. Let that sink in. Only 5 represent Black. Less than 2% of top executives at the 50 largest companies are Black. New Walgreens CEO Roz Brewer just became the only Black woman chief executive at a Fortune 500. Today, stubborn patterns of exclusion and discrimination are still keeping Black executives from reaching the top, despite the heights climbed by trailblazers such as former Xerox CEO Ursula Burns, the first Black woman CEO in the Fortune 500, and ex-American Express CEO Kenneth Chenault, who ran the credit card giant for 16 years. Too few Black executives being groomed for key posts, and too many corporations hunting for talent in all the same places. Here to speak with us today are 2 of a handful of Black female leaders paving the way in these uncharted territories and the topic of diversifying the executive suite. Ayana Parsons is a senior partner in Korn Ferry's board and CEO practice with nearly 20 years of executive talent and leadership experience as both a practitioner and consultant. She currently serves a diverse client base of customer and consumer-centric public and privately held companies, placing talented executives onto boards and into the C-suite via CEO, president, and chief marketing officer's roles. In addition, Ayana leads Korn Ferry's global Power of All platform, which helps unlock and unleash the potential and power of all leaders by driving greater diversity and inclusion in the C-suite and boardrooms. Prior to Korn Ferry, Ayana served as the global head of retail, consumer goods, and lifestyle industries at the World Economic Forum, where she led the preeminent global discussions at Davos, Switzerland, on topics related to her respective industries. As seasoned industry executive, Ayana's career spans sales, marketing, and general management roles at several of the world's most admired companies, including Philips, Pfizer, Kimberly-Clark, and Procter & Gamble. Ayana is also the wife of Dr. Ayana Parsons, confirming the saying that behind every successful man is a great woman. Tamika Curry-Smith is president of the TCS Group, a firm that provides human resources and diversity, equity, and inclusion solutions to a broad range of clients in a variety of industries. She was most recently vice president of global diversity and inclusion at Nike, where she was responsible for leading a global D&I team across the Nike, Jordan, and Converse brands. Prior to Nike, Tamika was head of diversity and inclusion at Mercedes-Benz USA. Ms. Curry-Smith has been featured at numerous publications, including Black Enterprise, the New York Times Magazine, Diversity Inc., and Diversity Professional Magazine. She has received various awards, among them the Network Journal's 25 Most Influential Black Women in Business, Diversity MBA's Top 100 Under 50 Executive Leaders, and Arizona Business Magazine's 50 Most Influential Women in Arizona Business, and the Chairman's Award from the National Black MBA Association. Please help me welcome Ayana Parsons and Tamika Curry-Smith. Hello, welcome. Let's make sure our mics are off.
Hi, Selma. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you for
Hello, everyone. So excited to be here.
hello. So let's go ahead and dig in. I'm so happy to have you both join us. Let's go ahead and dig in. I've got quite a few questions that I'm sure our audience will too. So Ayana, we'll start with your role at Korn Ferry. Speak to us a bit about what it entails and how you're helping the boards really get a grapple with diversity.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I have always been passionate about diversity and inclusion, particularly given the fact that I've often been the only, and that starts at an early age, being in a gifted and talented program as the only Black person, only Black girl in the room, and wondering why is this the case, and that theme certainly holds true throughout my professional life. And I will tell you, because of that, I am laser focused on helping diversify the face of leadership at the highest levels. So the work that I do today is not just placing board directors or presidents or CEOs into their roles, but certainly when they are coming from underrepresented backgrounds or historically disadvantaged backgrounds, Black and brown folks, let's be clear, then it takes more than placing them in the roles. You've got to make sure that these organizations, these boards, that they have inclusive cultures where difference is valued, where diversity is celebrated, and where you can really get the most out of people. And so my role today is very much focused on that. And that's the essence of Power of All. It truly is about unlocking and unleashing the full potential of all people. And when we do that, it's a significant aspiration, but when we do that, the world is a better place, and business is certainly a better place.
What about you, Tamika? Speak to us a bit about your role and what it entails. Help us kind of get a good scope on and how you ensure that you're helping executive suites, incorporate diversity.
Thank you, Selma and Ayana. So honored to be on this team with you talking today. Similar to Ayana's experience, most of my life growing up and certainly at college and in the corporate environment has been one of a few, if not the only. And how I would say I fell into DEI work originally when I was at Deloitte, which is where I started my career. And I eventually became their head of D&I for North and South America. But since that time, as you said, when you introduced me, I've led DEI at several additional organizations. And then also from the outside, have consulted with dozens more, including colleges and universities. And I'm at the point in my life and in my career where I really want to have an impact and make a difference in the lives of others. That is why I do this work. And much of how I spend my time is consulting with C-suite leaders, advising them on the issues that really impact the progress that they say they want to make. I am a big advocate of walk the talk, don't talk about it, be about it. And so really sharing best practices and proven strategies to, as Ayana said, not only help them get diverse talent in their organizations, but more importantly, to elevate them, to promote them, and to retain them. Because oftentimes what we see is Black and brown talent is brought into organizations, but they're not nurtured, they're not sponsored, the environments are not inclusive. And so we see this revolving door. So we really have to approach this work from multiple angles. It's not just about talent acquisition, but it's the entire employee pipeline that we need to be focused on.
And you both are just, a few of those who exist in this industry, just and also young. Ayana, yourself, you're one of the youngest in the industry in this specific role, and the only one really in this role. And I'm really curious. I know you briefly touched on how you made it into this position, but give us a little bit more insight on how did you end up where you are today, ending up in this decision making, but also almost like the pressure to make sure there's a lot of inclusivity and belonging for Black women.
Sure, sure. Well, I would be remiss if I said that I had this all planned. I certainly didn't, but I'm honored to be in the position that I'm in today, where I can truly affect change. Um, I've always loved business, and I had the distinct pleasure of being part of a program, the summer between my junior and senior year in high school, and it's called the LEAD program, Leadership, Education, and Development. And it was a program that exposed young, underrepresented minorities to business. And I had the opportunity, I'm from Hot Springs, Arkansas originally, born and raised, and very proud of that. And I had the opportunity to get on my first flight at the age of 16 and fly to Philadelphia and spend a summer at the Wharton School of Business. And knowing nothing about business, but being incredibly fascinated with these business school professors and doing case studies. I mean, I fell in love with business. And I said from that point on, as a young 16-year-old, that's what I'm going to pursue. I'm going to pursue a career in business. And fast forward, had the opportunity to attend Florida A&M University under the leadership of Dean Sybil Mobley, may she rest in peace. But I mean, she was a pioneer for Black people in business. And the School of Business and Industry at FAM is what really helped me blossom and grow. And it was at that point, as a young college student, that my aspirations were to be Fortune 5. First, it was going to be Fortune 500 CMO. And then I was going to be a Fortune 500 CEO. And fast forward through a number of experiences where I was taking on marketing strategy, general management and operating roles, but consistently facing, I think, very real headwinds that Black and Brown folks face. You sort of get a bit beat down. And I will tell you, the turning point for me was when I was appointed the global head of retail and consumer goods for the World Economic Forum, and had the opportunity to work alongside a number of CEOs, a number of board chairmen on macroeconomic issues that were facing the industry. And that renewed for me the sense of purpose that, you know what, there is a real possibility that more folks that look like me can get into the top job, the CEO job, and onto boards. And so I was, very, I'd say, motivated to help make that happen. And fast forward, I've helped found two very successful social impact businesses. So from that standpoint, I got the CEO stripe. And today I am laser focused on making sure that young women, young men who look like me, that do aspire to be CEOs, that do aspire to be on boards, that they can get there. So that's sort of my story and how I got here. But let me just say, they talk about there's no such thing as luck. It is when preparation meets opportunity. And that's a common theme throughout my career. I've always prepared. I've always done the work. You work hard, you perform. But I've always thought about, how do I try to make sure that I'm getting the right type of exposure, that I know what people are sort of saying about me when I'm not in the room, and that I have folks that are advocating on my behalf. And I wouldn't be where I am today had it not been for tremendous sponsors throughout my career. And let me just say, most of whom actually don't look like me. That's how I've gotten here. So hopefully that helps you understand a little bit more about my why, my story, and how I've sort of landed in this place.
That's a great point to make, Ayana, for us, for perspective, like that allyship, right? That first poll about allyship, right? What do we do? And you mentioned sponsors and individuals who didn't even look like you. And now you're paying it forward to make sure that others get that same chance. Thank you for sharing that. Tamika,
absolutely, thank you.
Talk a little bit about how you made it where you are. I know you said you fell right into it. How is that possible?
Yes. Well, when I say I fell because my undergraduate degree is in accounting. So if someone had told me when I was studying for the CPA exam that I would end up working in human capital, HR, and DEI, I probably would have told them they were crazy. Like Ayana, I had a love for business early on. Both of my parents were entrepreneurs. And so I just grew up seeing them kind of hustle and embody, what it means to be an entrepreneur and to be a Black entrepreneur and being successful. And I always loved math, so I kind of put math and business together and came up with accounting. But how I stumbled into DEI work is I was always the person at Deloitte. If you go back to early 90s, mid 90s, which is when I first started at Deloitte, not a whole lot of women, not a whole lot of people of color, certainly very few Black people. And so I was always advocating for where are we recruiting and do we have HBCUs? And even if we weren't going to HBCUs, if we were going to predominantly white institutions, were we connecting with the organizations on campus that are focused on underrepresented groups? So I was always volunteering to be a part of the recruiting team, to be on the interview slate when people came to the office. And then similar to what Ayana said, to be a mentor, a buddy as people started at the firm. Because like I said earlier, it's one thing to get people in the door, but it's another to keep them there. And so I think people just saw this natural inclination and passion that I had. And that's literally how I got offered my first role in DEI. But once I started doing this work, I absolutely loved it. I feel like it's not just my passion, but my purpose. And I think there are so many avenues that we all have to tackle to address this issue of inequity and elevating and empowering, uplifting the voices of people who are different. And so I've done that both inside of organizations, as you've heard, but also outside as a consultant. And I love what I do. Certainly wouldn't be here without a lot of mentors, a lot of sponsors. And I when I tell people they need to put together their kind of board team on their own, and that team needs to be diverse. It should include people that are like them, people that aren't like them. It should include both people within their organizations and people outside. We really, as I said, have to be multifaceted. We have to learn the real deal and get the hard truths, but also have people advocating for us as well. So
Why do we think this is great, like build up to my next question for both of you? Why do you think, or why are there so few CEOs in particular, Black female
mm,
CEOs in particular, in the Fortune 500? Maybe Ayana, we'll start with you.
Yeah. Um, there's a lot of reasons
mhm,
to sort of unpack this issue, but at the core, I think this boils down to lack of sponsorship because the talent is there, and I do a lot of work around CEO succession. And when you think about CEO succession, there is sort of the near term and the longer term succession. And I would encourage anyone who is in a leadership role within their company to think about who is in that succession pipeline. Who's in that succession pipeline, if it's 0 to sort of 3 years out, 3 to 5, even 5 to 10. And I think not enough companies are taking a hard look at the pipeline and asking the difficult question. So if there aren't any Black and brown people in the pipeline or women of color, why? Why not? Does the talent not exist within my organization? And if it doesn't, you got another problem. You need to fix
mhm.
that. And if it does, why are these women of color getting stuck at certain levels and not being put forward for promotional opportunities? So to me, that is a major issue. I mean, companies are spending, we have clients that are spending upwards of 125,000, 150,000, even 200,000 for very intensive executive leadership development. We have something called our Executive to Leader Institute that is all about helping top talent within organizations start to prepare for the top job. And we're doing a lot of work around making sure that we are asking the extra questions of our clients and making sure that that institute is incredibly inclusive so that once again, you can unlock and unleash the power of all people. But if you have a system and a process in place that is that in and of itself is systemic in nature and is creating many barriers to all of this talent being able to progress and move within the organization, that's a problem. And I will tell you, when I think about inclusion, I think about it on two fronts. There's sort of the behavioral piece, and that's why so many companies are doing unconscious bias training. We've evolved to more conscious inclusion, and we do a lot of that at Korn Ferry. But then the balance of it is, how are you driving systemic change and really challenging your practices, your processes that are keeping people from advancing? And so that's why you got to take a really hard look at recruitment practices. You've got to look at performance review practices, succession planning practices, and turn those things on their head. So hopefully that helps you sort of understand, but all of this comes back to a lot of the systemic barriers that are in place that are preventing more folks that look like us from continuing to advance.
Tamika, would you like to take a moment and address that question too? Thank you, Ayana.
Yes, I mean, all of that. And I mean, I just synthesize it as this: talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. If
Love it.
you go back to when we all took statistics, those of us that did, and we had the bell-shaped curve, the fact that 93% of CEOs and Fortune 500 are white men could not even statistically be possible in a normal environment. So we know there is something going on. There is bias that is rampant in organizational systems. And so that systemic approach that Ayana pointed out is so key. Organizations have to really be committed to looking at all of their policies and practices, to seeing, are the outcomes equitable? We know they aren't. So if they aren't, what are they going to do to truly dismantle the way that they operate now, to infuse DEI into a new way of operating, and then to make sure that the whole organization is on board to move forward in that way. But then here's the piece that I think is absolutely critical, is measurement and accountability. This is one of the few areas where half of the organizations don't even measure where they are when it comes to DEI. The half that do measure, there's absolutely no accountability if people miss their goals. There's no transparency, so they don't even share the numbers. So that this whole ecosystem, DEI needs to be treated as any other business function, where there's a plan put in place, there are resources provided for it, and then people are held accountable, and there are consequences if they miss their goals. So this is when I talk about walking the talk. That's how you get more diversity in the executive suite, is you make a commitment, you put the entire weight of your organization as a CEO, as the executive team behind it, and you hold people accountable until progress is made. Two, for too long, we have prioritized comfort over progress. And that's why progress has been so slow, quite frankly.
We have a variety of attendees who are listening to us right now, some of which are decision makers and some of which are really coming on board to be inspired by both of you in your leadership positions, and hope to reach that level at some point. So we've got a question here actually from one of our attendees who's addressing Ayana, but I think for both of you, this could be a good question. Can you address self-empowerment? Many of us suffer from the imposter syndrome from time to time. You come from a place of power and confidence. What tips do you have?
Yeah, I think in frameworks. And so the first, if I think about just a framework, it would be first you got to believe it. And that comes from within, and doing the work to believe that you are capable, to believe that you are smart, and to believe that you can get there. And again, that is inner work. But once you believe it, you need to surround yourself. And I love what Tamika said earlier, with your own personal board of directors that is going to be incredibly diverse. And you need to speak your aspirations to those folks who are going to support you, this board of directors. So you first believe it, then speak that truth, and you let them know what your goals, what your aspirations are, so that they can help support you to get there. But that is the first step, believing it. Then it's sort of dreaming it in terms of the sort of the possibilities. And then ultimately you got to do the hard work to achieve it. But when it comes to frameworks, that is one that I live by. And I will tell you, this work of having sponsors who will create opportunities for you, who will work tirelessly behind the scenes and in front of the scenes on your behalf, that is an incredible piece of the puzzle to ultimately help elevate yourself and get there. But I will tell you, as a woman, we talk about this a lot. Imposter syndrome is real. And that is where having networks of of other executives, of other middle managers, of just other peers that you can support and that can support you in that. You have to have these types of groups and sort of advocacy groups. So I would seek those out. If there are employee resource groups or business resource groups within your organization, or even just creating that on your own, make sure you've got that network.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big framework person too, Ayana. I think it comes from being in professional services firms. We're surrounded by frameworks, and I would say an equation that has worked for me is performance plus relationships equals opportunity. So I think first and foremost, we've got to perform. Like, you need to be not just good, but great at what you do. Know your business, whatever that is, your function, your role inside and out, and also be looking for how you can continue to add value. We also have to build relationships across the organization. The way that I've gotten to where I am is through people that I've known, and I've genuinely approached this process of building relationships. And so what happens is what Ayana said: people know about things when I'm not even in the room, and they bring those opportunities to me. And then here's what I found that has happened. When I know what I'm doing and I feel confident in my skills and abilities, when I have the network of people who are speaking on my behalf and mentoring me and sponsoring me, I then get those opportunities. I'm in those rooms and I'm thinking, I'm just as good, if not better, than the other people at the table. And so it's almost like a machine that gets fed. The more that you do the performance, the more that you build the relationships, the more opportunities you get. And then the confidence gets built because you realize you deserve to be at the table. You
Yeah.
add value, sometimes more value than the people who've been there longer than you have. And so I think you're right, Ayana. We have to believe it, but then once we achieve it, get in there, hold our place at the table with confidence, and then more importantly, empower others and make sure that they get a seat at the table too. So I think it's an evolution. It comes from really putting in the work and starting to know that you are just as capable and competent as others. All that we need to do is crack that opportunity nut and the doors will open.
I love that. I love that. It made me think of uh, a sort of a formula that I learned pretty early on in my career. I was at P&G at the time, and it's called the PI model. And the P stands for
Yes, yes.
performance, the
Hmm.
I is image, and the E is exposure. And the more senior you get in your career, the less it's about performance, because performance is table
Hmm.
stakes. You're going to
Hmm.
perform. It
That's right.
becomes about your image. Again, what are people sort of saying about you? What image are you projecting to the world? And then it becomes about exposure. And there's good exposure, there's bad exposure, but making
Mhm.
sure that you're getting exposure to the right decision makers, influencers for your career.
That is excellent advice. I love that pie. I love that. That's a really great takeaway for all of our audience to kind of lean in on. We have 1 minute left, but I really want to make sure we get to also giving some great advice for those of us joining us at the executive level, who are the decision makers at companies who may perhaps be some of our partners with Yardstick or potential partners. So, what advice would you give them, and let's say in a sentence or two, to empower more Black women to become part of the executive suite successfully? Tamika?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is when you look at all the statistics, women of color are at the bottom in terms of opportunity and in terms of representation. So, I say that I use here's another framework, but I call it the 3 I's: intention, integration, and investment. So organizations have to be intentional. This does not happen on its own. You have to really make a commitment and then go after it. Like I said earlier, really mobilizing your resources to make this happen. Integration is what I said before, really dismantling your inequitable systems and integrating DEI into how you operate, both from a people perspective and a business perspective. And then last is investment. Invest. in your women of color, invest in your Black and brown talent. That means developing them. That means sponsoring them and having very formal programs. That means having mentoring programs. That means having a separate succession and destination planning process where you're mapping out their career, understanding what the gaps are to get to the C-suite, and then intentionally putting together a plan for that. So I would say the 3 I's are a really great way to move the needle and to not just say you want this to happen, but put the resources behind it to make it happen.
I love it. So Tamika, I mean, I couldn't have said it any more beautifully. And I love the 3 I's. I'm going to take that with me as well. And I'll even probably just simplify it even more. If you are on a board, if you are a CEO, if you are in a C-suite or any leadership role, and you are not a person of color, you need to be intentional and sponsor at least one person of color, but certainly more. And if they can be a Black woman or a woman of color, even better. Because as you know, women of color are the most historically disadvantaged. And when we talk about sponsorship, I'm not talking about mentorship. Mentorship,
Right.
people of color are over mentored and under sponsored. Sponsors create opportunities. Mentors sort of give advice. Great, we need that too, but I'm talking about someone who can change the trajectory of your career. We need more sponsors. So that's my advice.
Thank you both. This has been great. We can talk all day, I know, and we've got other panels. I can't believe it flew by the 25 minutes. But I want to thank you, Ayana. I want to thank you, Tamika, so much for taking the time and spending the energy and sharing your experience and advice with our attendees. Thank you all. And I also want to point out that we've got several questions still left in the Q&A section. We are keeping track of those questions and we'll facilitate with the speakers. And we'll get back to you all via email once we're done with the programming. Thank you again, Ayana and Tamika.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.